In this video, as promised, we're going to start off with a quick challenge requiring you to use what you learned in the last one. Then we're actually going to integrate arrow functions into the Notes application. To kick things off, let's go ahead and create a new script in that playground folder where you're going to work through the challenge. I'll call it something like 3-arrow challenge.js. This is the script you're going to end up working with. Down below, we can use Control-C to shut down nodemon for the old file, and we can run nodemon through the new empty one. So nodemon 3-arrow challenge.js. Now currently it's not going to print anything, but as you start to add code, we'll start to see the output here. Now the actual challenge is going to require you to expand on a little example I've created. And we can find that by heading over to the browser once again and going to the following URL. It's links.mead.io/arrow-challenge. When you visit this URL, it's going to redirect you over to another GitHub gist. And right here, we have the contents of this JavaScript file. Let's take the entire file from the first line to the 21st line and bring it over to the challenge file we just created. So your job is going to be to expand on the code we have here to get the project to actually work. If we were to save things in its current state, we can see we're getting an error down below. Let's talk about why. The goal here is to essentially fill in the blanks. I have this tasks object, and down below we are trying to use a method on that object which doesn't exist. It's your job to actually create the method and get things working. So big picture goal, create method to get incomplete tasks. So this new method is going to be called getTasksToDo. You're going to define it on the tasks object. And the method itself is going to return an array of all of the tasks that are not completed. That would include clean yard, which has a completed value of false, and it would include film course, which also has a completed value of false. The method should not return grocery shopping since that task is already done. So you can use filter to filter out just the tasks you want. Now, once you have that in place and you are returning the new array of just the incomplete tasks, you can go ahead and save the script to test your work. I already have a call to the new method you'll be creating down below. When you save the script, you should see an array with two objects printing, and it should be these two objects right here. This first one should not show up. Take as much time as you need to knock that out, test your work. When you're done, come back and click play. How'd that go? I'm going to kick things off by defining this method, getTasksToDo. I'll do that right here, either below or above the tasks property that already exists. Either way would work. I'll put it below, getTasksToDo. And in this case, we do not want to use an arrow function since arrow functions are bad for methods. We're going to use a standard function like so. Now we just learned about the ES6 method definition syntax, so we can use that here. Remember, we remove the function keyword and the colon, defining our method like this. Now inside of the function, we can move on to step 2 and use filter to return just the incompleted tasks. So right here, I'm going to create this new array, const tasks to do, and we are going to set it equal to a new array, which we'll get back from this .tasks, which is our array, .filter, which is going to allow us to filter them. Now I wanted you to use an arrow function for this, so that is exactly what I'm going to do. I start with my arguments, then my arrow, then my curly braces, and in here, I want to return true when the completed value for the task is false. So right here, I'm going to have access to the individual task. I'm going to return true when task dot completed is equal to false. If it is false, I want this item to stay in the new array because that's the tasks to do array. Now that we have that in place, we can go ahead and return tasks to do. Excellent. If we save the program, hopefully things are working, and down below, I'm now seeing the results we expected. I have clean yard and film course showing up, and grocery shopping is nowhere to be found. Now let's go ahead and make this more concise using what we learned about arrow functions. I'm going to return this array directly. There's no need to create a variable if we're just going to return it as the next thing we do. Right here, I can save the program and we have the exact same functionality we had before. From there, we can use that shorthand syntax. So remember, if we have an arrow function that just returns some result right away, we can take that result and we can put it in place of the curly braces. So I'm going to remove the curly braces and everything inside, and we're going to take task.completed equals false and put it right here. So task.completed triple equals false. Now we have the exact same functionality. Once again, down below, everything is still working, but we're using that shorthand arrow function syntax. So for each task in the array, this function is still getting called, and the function is still returning true if the task is not complete, and it's still returning false if the task is complete. And there we go. We have completed the challenge, getting just a bit more experience working with ES6 methods and arrow functions. Now, I don't typically do challenges like this where I give you code and it's your job to expand on it, but it is something I'm experimenting with. If you liked this format, let me know. If you thought it was more confusing than helpful, I'd love to know that as well. You can just send me a private message through the Udemy platform. I'd love to hear what you think. Now that you have a bit more experience working with these, we're actually going to integrate everything we learned into the Notes application. So I'm going to close down our 2 files from the playground directory, and we're going to turn our focus to app.js and to notes.js, where we can take advantage of both of these. I'm going to collapse the playground directory, and I'm going to bring us back to the Notes app folder. So from the terminal, I'll use Control-C to shut down NodeMon, then cd:/Notes app to go back to the Notes app directory, and then I'll use clear to clear the terminal output. Now, the goal for this second challenge is for you to refactor every single function in our app, which is maybe only 10. We have functions in notes.js that are indeed using that function keyword, and the same thing is true in app.js. Every single function is using the standard function definition. So over in app.js, let's talk about what I'd like you to do. As I just mentioned, goal, refactor all functions. Every single function needs to change. If that function is a method, you're going to use the ES6 method definition syntax, which is more concise. Now, otherwise, if it's not a method, you're going to use the most concise arrow function possible. So as an example, let's look at add note. When you go through this challenge, add note is going to become an arrow function as we're not defining it directly on an object. Now, this can't take advantage of the shorthand syntax because there are plenty of statements inside of there, and that's okay. Other functions like the one right here can indeed take that shorthand syntax into account, and in that case, you would want to use it. So just try to use the most concise syntax possible. Step 3, test your work. Whenever we refactor our code, we want to make sure we didn't break anything. So none of the changes you're going to make here should change the app's functionality at all. Run a few commands, just making sure that add and remove work correctly. All right, take some time to knock this one out. Don't forget to test things out. When you're done, come back and click play. Let's get to it. I'll be starting down below with the functions in app.js. These are all methods, so we're defining a function directly on an object, and in all 4 cases, we're going to use the ES6 shorthand syntax. So for this function, we will remove the colon and the function keyword, and we're going to do the same thing down below for the handler for remove. We'll do it for the handler for list, which isn't currently filled out, and we'll also do it with the handler for read, which once again is still something we'll end up building. That's actually it for app.js. Nothing too bad here. We just had a couple of functions that could be improved. Now we're going to move on to step 2, work in the other file and actually use arrow functions. So over here, let's just start from the top of the file and work down for each function. Now get notes. Get notes can indeed be an arrow function. So I'll remove the function keyword and then I'll go ahead and set up the arrow. Now in this case, yes, you could have definitely used the shorthand syntax, but since I personally know we'll be adding more code to it, I'm going to not do that for the moment. But if you did, that is A-okay. Next up, we have our add note function. This one has plenty of statements inside of there. There's no chance we're going to be able to use the shorthand syntax, but I can still remove the function keyword, add my arrow in, and use the arrow function. Next up, we have our filter method. So we call filter and we pass to it our callback function. This is something that can be an arrow function, and it's something that can also use that shorthand syntax. So one way of refactoring, especially when you're newer to a concept, is to duplicate the code you're going to change, then comment out a copy so you can see it as a reference. Now we can build things up using the arrow function. You didn't need to do this, but it's just one approach that can make life a little easier. So right here, for filter, we're going to set up the argument right here in our arrow functions argument list. I'll call it note, like we did down below. Then I'm going to set up my arrow, and I'll notice that all I was doing was returning a value, so I can use the shorthand syntax and type that expression out right here. That was me checking if note.title equals the title value passed in as the argument. Now we have the duplicate notes variable getting generated exactly as it was before, but using the shorter, more concise syntax. Now, shorter and more concise isn't always a good thing. There are examples in programming where it's nice to actually have code that's readable. In this case, though, the arrow function is definitely readable. If at first it seems like it's doing more harm than good in terms of your ability to read code, I promise that will get easier as you see it more and more. Down the list, we have remove note next. Once again, can't use the shorthand syntax, but I can still remove the function keyword, add the arrow in, and take advantage of that. From here, we can indeed refactor the function we are passing to filter. Now, ahead of time, I'm just going to take the expression we were returning. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard so I can use it for my refactor. Right here, I'll remove everything we're passing into filter, and I will set up my brand new arrow function, pasting in the stuff I just cut out. The only thing left to do is to set up that argument, which I had called note. Next up, we keep going down the list. We have save notes and we have load notes. Both can be converted over to arrow functions, even though they can't use that shorthand syntax. So right here, an arrow function, then down below, another arrow function. Now in this case, maybe you made the argument that because we eventually put these on an object, they should just be methods defined here. The reason we're not doing that is because these functions weren't designed to work with any specific object. None of them use this, so it's not important to maintain this. In our case, this is exactly what we're going to do here, and it's the same approach we'll take in other similar files throughout the course. Now, the last thing to do was test our work, so I'm going to remove the challenge comments. I'm going to make sure all of my scripts are saved, and we'll head over to notes.json to see what test data we have to work with. To start, let's go ahead and remove the one note we have. So node app.js remove, passing in a value for title. In this case, the title of the one note is list. I'm going to go ahead and remove it by running the command. And what do I get? It seems that things worked. The note's gone and we got our message. Now, if I were to rerun it, I would expect to see the error message since there are no notes and we can't remove this one. So remove is working. Let's go ahead and add a note right here. Node app.js add. We will pick a title for this new note. I'll set the title equal to the string t, and then we'll set up the body as well, equal to the string b. Now, if I go ahead and run that, it should add the new note to my array and it's showing up. And if I were to rerun that command, it should run the other code since a duplicate would be found. And right here, I can see that note title is taken. So there we go. We did some refactoring. We made sure our refactoring didn't break anything. And now we're ready to continue on to the next video as we start to wrap up this little demonstration project showing off what Node can do. I'm excited to get to that. Let's jump right in to the next one.